Go.
Good evening. Welcome to the April 15th remote school committee meeting. Before we start, do a roll call vote. Carla?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Sarah?
Here.
Aaron?
Here.
Sean?
Here.
And Chuck is here. I'd like to, first of all, congratulate Aaron and Sean on their recent elections and welcome you to the Sean's continuation and Sarah's beginning. So thank you, and also give you a moment, each of you, a moment of privilege if you'd like to have anything to say. So I don't know, Sarah, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm excited to be here. I have a lot to learn, but I'm really excited to dig in on all the work we have ahead of us together. I think we have a really great group of people to work together on this. So thank you, everybody, and be patient with me.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, it's been a really intense first year, and I think we've set the groundwork for a really exciting few years ahead, and I'm happy to have the chance to continue to be a part of it. So let's get to work.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both, and good luck. So for public comment tonight, the chat function is open, and as always, we'll respond to items that are on the agenda when we're talking about that issue, and if something that's not on the agenda, we'll address at the end of the meeting. So one of the things I learned when going through all the policies that I have been doing is technically we're supposed to, if which I do quite often, I'll rearrange the agenda and we should be voting on that. We didn't rearrange tonight, so we're not going to vote tonight, but my bad on that, and I'll make sure we do that in the future. So for tonight, we'll first have a consent agenda. Then we'll go into old business, specifically with the space discussion, an update on the spring in person, and then the quarterly reports from HR and finance. Then we'll take up reports, and then with new business, there's several policy discussions. So the first thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Tom?
I guess I have one question on it as I look at it. It's the ref donations, and first a statement. Thank you so much to REF for all that you do with our schools and all that you're able to fundraise for and then give back to our schools. I'm very curious about the history curriculum purchased through REF, though. I was wondering if anybody could provide some feedback on what that is, and I guess to a degree why we have to pay for it through REF as well. So if anybody has any feedback or understanding on that, it'd be appreciated.
John, did you want to grab that? Or
I can start it. So this was REF did their grant program a little bit differently this year, where they reached out because of the pandemic. They reached out directly to buildings and staff regarding different needs that they may have during the pandemic. This was based on a curriculum that the history department was looking at for their discussions that they were having around different topics. It's more of a supplementary curriculum. It wasn't something that was going to be funded through the budget, but I know Gail would have more information as well on this.
Sorry, I tried to jump in earlier, but I think I unmuted myself too soon, and I think Jeff muted me. So we did meet, sorry, Jeff. So we did meet with the folks from REF, and we also met with Principal Boynton as well on this. And this was an item that she worked closely with her department heads on. It is a 1-year subscription-based service, I believe, that they are trying out in the current year. So they donated the funds for us. We've gone through and vetted it on our end from a technology standpoint and a curriculum standpoint. So they donated it, but it went through our regular vetting process. So we just wanted folks to know that it did follow all of our regular procedures that we use for any type of material we're purchasing.
Okay. So thank you for that. And the 1-year subscription also means that we may come back next year at some point in time, maybe as part of the budget if they like it, or things along those lines. So, and that would flip into the operating budget at that point in time, in all likelihood, right?
Correct. And we do, as part of the process, anytime we're receiving grants such as this or any of the other grants that you saw we had this year, that's a discussion we have at the outset as well. And the high school is aware if it's something that they would want, it would fall into their per pupil based budget for next year. So they would factor that in for renewal purposes.
Okay. Thank you. Chuck, I have one more if I still may.
Sure.
So Gail, stay on camera here because the next one is you and maybe Dr. Stice as well. The grant with regards to the summer programs. That's great to see, A, that we applied for it, and B, that we already have a plan for it. It seems like it's addressing our early literacy side. Do we have any perceived need or understanding need of other levels? And would this grant help us with other levels? Or is it only for like the K1-2 type age group that we're talking about here?
So this, Dr. Stice has been working very closely with myself and Chris Nelson, so I will let her dive into that aspect of it.
So we are actually collecting the data right now to see how many students we have that are going to qualify at that level for this service. We've been working very closely with Allison Stryker. She's using all of our early screeners that we've been doing with the students to help the principals narrow down the pool. Once we know the number of students, we plan on expanding, and we've actually talked to Dr. Doherty about using some different grant money to hopefully do something for the middle school students as well as the elementary school students for literacy, and also something for math. So for that particular $45,000, we're really focusing on the younger students, but we have an eye towards the bigger population.
And as a reminder to the folks here, we have 2 additional tranches of the ESSER grants. We have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 that does allow for summer programming to address some of these needs. So we're currently working through looking at the best utilization of each one of those grants based upon what we're required to do and when they expire. So we're trying to get the interplay of all of them.
Great. I very much appreciate hearing all of that, and it's great to hear and see. I guess the plea I would make on that front is, having been a parent who's received a notification like in the middle of June about something starting in July, if we can get that notification out early enough so parents can plan appropriately. You know, people are starting summer vacation plans already, and the sooner we notify, the better. But you all know that, you got your hands on top of it, so I just wanted to appreciate that and say thank you for putting it in there in the first place. So thank you.
And Tom, if I can piggyback for a second, so I've been working with the middle school principals and the high school principals on the details that Jen and Gail brought up, and we are coming up with a plan so that we can communicate it as soon as possible.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay, thank you. So now we'll have the district space discussion, and I'd like to welcome Sarah Levesque, Joe Huggins, Pat Tompkins from the Permanent Building Committee is here, I believe, and and the leader of it, Dale Guinap. So I don't know whether and I'm sorry, I just saw it. So you mean we were going to hold reports until?
I mean, it's your call at the chair, but I thought you might want to consider at least taking the student report out of order, even if we have to vote on it first, given it's a student, and we're going to be here for a couple of hours on several other items before we get to reports on the agenda.
Sure, I'll allow that. I was thought of that, but then I got onto something else. So, hi, Bridget, welcome.
Hello.
So, rightfully so, we didn't want to make you sit through hours of stuff. So if you wanted to give your report now, that's great.
Okay. So the last day for registration for spring sports was today, and Saturday, April 10th, the football team won against Arlington High School, and this Saturday, April 17th, our football team will also face Lexington High School. Friday, April 9th, the girls swim team beat Arlington High School, and tomorrow they also go up against Lexington. Today, our indoor track team had a meet with Lexington. I don't know the results yet, though I'm sure they're out somewhere. Tuesday, April 13th, our varsity volleyball beat Lexington, and they will face them again on Saturday. Opening night for our spring musical 9 to 5 is Friday, April 30th, and it's an outdoor production at the high school with limited seating. After April vacation, RMHS will have a Spirit Week arranged by our Welcome Back Committee. So Monday is going to be Red Rocket Pride Day, Tuesday is Pajama Day, Wednesday is Beach Day, and Thursday is Silly Hat Day. And that is all I have.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so we'll go to the, John, did you want to start that off or?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So in your packet is a couple of things. One is the presentation that was done in December by Dale. This will be the third presentation of the elementary space. One was done in 2019, one was done in 2020 of December, and then this evening. What we are and then the second part of the presentation, which is in your packet also, is the MSBA timeline, which I know we've had some discussion about in the past. What we're asking the committee for this evening is to provide some direction after our presentations on whether or not we are going to be submitting a statement of interest under the MSBA process. The window starts on April 20th and it completed on June 25th. So we have until June 25th to submit the statement of interest. So given that context and introduction, I'm going to turn it over first to Dale Guinap of Guinap Architects.
Okay, thank you, John. So I'm assuming I can share my screen here, and I'll also hope that the right screen comes up because it does a little bit funky. There, are you seeing a full screen slide?
Yes.
Okay, so to walk you through, and I'm laid this out to be a very brief overview because most of you are familiar with it. So the purpose was to do a master plan for the elementary schools. So the task that we undertook was to look at the enrollment projections for the next 20 years, and we engaged NESDEC, the New England School Development Council, to prepare those numbers for us, to then look at the existing building capacities and how that relates to the enrollment, and from the enrollment, look at the space needs requirements, and there's really two components to that. I'll touch on both aspects, the enrollment and then the educational program as it's changed over the years. Based on the space needs and the existing conditions, look at viable planning options that the town could evaluate. And overall, to say that you really look to provide a space solution for at least the next 20 years. You really want to do a master plan that thinks for the next 50 or 100 years, but you certainly wouldn't build space that's needed for beyond 20 years. But you do want to think about what action that you take in terms of preservation of sites, etc., for a long term for the town's history. And then acknowledging the pre-K program, and as you know, there is some flexibility with that, but there is a lot of pressure and increasing demand to have additional pre-K spaces.
Dale.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We seem to have lost your share, and we're seeing ourselves now.
Oh,
something happened. So that.
Let's see.
I was thinking it was my device here.
Well, what you'll probably get to do is see the my preview screen then. Nope, that didn't work either.
Now we see the space thing, yep.
Okay, but you're seeing sort of the large and a small version. Is that right?
We're seeing two versions on top of each other with your desktop behind it and stuff right now. So if you go to presentation mode there, we should be able to see it, I think.
The problem is if I click the presentation version, it shows on the other screen, and I rehearsed this earlier today with our in-house teams. But anyway, I assume this is large enough to see it.
Dale, do you want me to share mine?
Either way, if people can see this fine, I can just go on through it. Is that?
This is fine.
Okay. Fine. So again, these were the basic steps that we undertook. So a little bit of a background. It's kind of out of order to this context, but to understand the space needs, the Mass School Building Authority's regulations for elementary school is really 160 square feet per student. But the reality is that we call it community standards. Essentially, all of the elementary schools that have been submitted to MSBA over the past 5 years, there might be some exception, but they average 190 square feet per student for elementary schools. And that the MSBA accepts that. It's just essentially what happens. If you look at the Reading schools, elementary schools, excluding the Wood End school, you average 137 square feet. And we excluded Wood End because that is your one school that is in fact 190 square feet per student. If you throw Wood End into the mix, you get 146 square feet. But essentially for the other schools, you're somewhere around, in the 50 square feet per student short of gross building area than would be expected. Then when you look at enrollment, there's modest increases. It's around 9% increase. And again, this was developed by NESDEC. And you can see across the bottom here, the majority of that growth is expected in the Killam district, a little bit in Birch, Meadow, so basically around the center of town, and then smaller numbers at each of the other schools for a total of 115 students. And again, that's around 9%. So not major significant growth compared to many communities, but nonetheless, for elementary school, this essentially means 9 to 10 classrooms. So it is a significant component to deal with when you try to find that additional space to accommodate those needs. Almost equally as important is the programming. So I said it wrong. It's a 6% increase, not 9. From a program space, roughly 29 classrooms have been taken over the last 15 years for special needs programs. So that's 29% additional area. And I used the 15 years because that's essentially when the schools were renovated. And so 2 of the schools were done in the 93, 94. The other 2, excluding Wood End or excluding Killam, were done in 2003 and 4. So that takes us back that 15 years. And so this really explains why you're short on the space. When you take that overall average of 35%, and it just sort of proves out the math and the situation, because if you take the Wood End school, which was built more to these community standards and has 190 square feet, is roughly 35% bigger than the average of 137 square feet that you have at the other schools. So essentially, you know, the program is one of the biggest components of needing additional space. So from there, we looked at all of the sites and we tried to do a very broad range, essentially every conceivable planning option that we could come up with for at least a preliminary evaluation. And from that, a few things emerged that I'll be very short with because we've talked about them before. There are certain limitations to accommodating the growth at least 3 of the sites. Joshua Eaton is sort of a pinch point between that and the playfields access, the historical portion of the building. It would be, there's limited opportunities for expansion of the school that works well with the current infrastructure and so on. Barrow School, also similar between somewhat neighborhood constraints, traffic, etc., the slope to the site, the wetlands and other aspects. It would be difficult to do a significant expansion there without a total replacement of the school, and the site is basically fully occupied now in terms of the number of students for the acreage. And the Wood End School also has limitations. The lower portion of the site, the wetlands limited on the other side. There is a small area that is developable that would be available to do some expansion, but it kind of connects to the school a little bit incorrect on that side because of the layout of the school. So those would be candidates, and we did look at versions of that, but it left really the 2 main sites that make sense for expansion are Birch, Meadow, and Killam. And so 2 options that seem to make the most sense was that the majority of the growth be absorbed, and most of the growth is in the Killam district. And also the Killam, there's a number of reasons the Killam School is a good candidate in that site. So it seemed that the majority of the growth and space needs could be addressed primarily with the Killam site. To do it exclusively at the Killam site, with say a new school or potential renovation, and address the pre-K becomes very large. But it appears that the site is quite likely or perhaps capable of handling all of the growth by a limited amount of redistricting and replacing the Killam School with a larger school, and handle all of the needs under one project essentially on one site. Another version of that, and as this proceeds into the next step of doing a feasibility study for a particular project or site, would be looked at to determine how large a school would be appropriate there. Another version would be to do a 2-project site, or 2-site project rather, at the Killam School. Again, do a new school that would be somewhat smaller, and use Birch Meadow to do an addition to accommodate some of that additional growth. This would make it 2 sites over more extended time, but this would allow incorporating the pre-K program into the elementary schools and not necessitate it remain at the high school. So those were the 2 options out of 20 or some originally explored that seemed to be the most viable for the town and offered for evaluation. Just to kind of review, why the Killam site. Most of the growth is occurring across that band of town on the east side. It is the only school really on the east side of town. That doesn't mean it would have to be the one to develop, but it would be difficult to say omit that school, and we looked at other options of trying to say downsize to 4 schools, which was not practical. It's basically centrally located in terms of the middle schools, and it works also basically even with some redistricting to keep kids together in elementary schools going to the same middle school. So we'd like to create an environment where kids, that are in elementary school together stay together as they advance into the middle school system. And it's more of a coincidence rather than anything driving this, suggestion or direction, is that it was built in 1969, and it's the only building that has not had a major renovation. So there are a number of systems, the HVAC and other things, that the building would likely require significant expense to modernize it from its 1969. It's not been touched that much. It's been well maintained. The windows have been replaced, but essentially it will need some other system replacements if there is not a significant project. So to wrap that all together, essentially you need about 35% more elementary school space than you currently have. There's the two sites, Birch, Meadow, and Killam, that seem to be the most practical to address the needs for a variety of reasons. If you do it all at Killam or even with Birch, it's going to mean a much larger school, say at the Killam site, but it would really not be possible to do just Killam and also accommodate all of the pre-K within the elementary school system, removing it from the high school. And if you do the two sites, Killam and say at Birch Meadow, there's probably about an additional $20 million cost total. And just plotting out, which John will get into, talking about the timeline for the MSBA for reimbursement. While anything can happen realistically, probably because your need would come sooner than the opportunities for a second MSBA project, that additional cost would likely be largely borne by the town directly. And with that, I'll conclude and try to answer any questions or let John continue with the other portion.
Thank you, Dale. Sean?
Welcome.
Thanks, Chuck. So Dale, I want to confirm my understanding on a couple of things. So the reason that Scheme A, even though it's a larger school at Killam, does not address pre-K is because in Scheme A, we'd still have pre-K, and some of pre-K would be in the high school space as it is today.
Correct.
Whereas in Scheme B, you'd be moving all of pre-K to the new site at the new Killam building. Is that the thinking?
Well, no, not necessarily, but it could be absorbed in, depending on redistricting and a few other factors within the elementary school somewhere. Just as now you have some pre-K off at the high school. So we could put it in the elementary school somewhere. It's not saying it would have to be at Birch or have to be at Killam, but it could be distributed between the elementary schools.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll unshare here.
Oh, wait a minute, we get Tom.
Yeah, this might be more of a question for John than it is for Dale. And it's not in this deck; it's more in the packet that we received. In regards to the special education classrooms, John, we list 6 inclusion classrooms as additive. My understanding of inclusion is not that we're removing classrooms from the general ed, but rather we're pushing in our special education students into the general education classrooms. So in essence, it's kind of a minor point, but in essence, that's not an added classroom from a programmatic perspective, is it? It's just you're leveraging that to teach both your special education and your general education students at the same time.
Yeah, those are the co-taught classes that are at Birch Meadow, where that 6 is coming from. But aside, they still will need some additional space other than just the co-taught classrooms. But it was to show that we do have that co-taught program at Birch Meadow. But you do have some sub-separate classes at Birch Meadow as well.
Right. So those sub-separate would be covered by the 9 number in that category.
Yeah.
So just from, I mean, so is this where the like half classrooms, where if they're pulled out for specific uses, they would, is that where the smaller classrooms would be used? They're in the inclusion classrooms for most of the day, but when they're pulled out for specific services, that's in the half classrooms.
The related services or other services, yes.
Okay. It doesn't materially change the math, but it's really not taking a full classroom necessarily, I guess is my point.
Correct.
Okay.
Sean?
So I also have two questions that are probably directly pointed at John. So, I know at one point there was this discussion of an early childhood center and a single location, somewhere in town, ideally somewhere in the middle of town. The appeal of that, I understand the appeal of that. Now that we've had RISE at the high school for, a period of time, what are it's not clear to me what the sort of fundamental downsides are of having it in that space. It's, it's sort of a well segregated space from the high school, and there's a playground there, and, the space seems to work from what I can tell. I'm sending my kid there in the fall. So I'm curious, just as we think about A versus B, what's the appeal at this point of pulling RISE into an elementary school building?
So the biggest issue is that it restricts the number of students that you can accept into the program. And what happens in some years is that, because you do need to keep a ratio in the integrated preschool of 51-49. Some years, because we have an increase in number of special education students on IEPs starting at age 3, that we need an equal amount +1 of what they refer to as typical students. So if that special education number goes too high, you don't have enough space to add more mainstream typical students, then you have a space crunch, and that has happened in some years. Now, the one thing that is available is that we have 9 modulars that are not included in the plan, which could be used for preschool. So that's something to keep in mind, that they would stay at the sites that there already are, and you could have those as preschool classrooms.
Fair, and I mean, I guess, so I understand that the space in the high school is limited because that's a physical space that's there. But if we're talking about adding to the overall space portfolio, and we're talking about a redistricting, hypothetically, it doesn't have to be the current space at Woodend that's dedicated to RISE.
That's correct.
So we could find capacity in other ways for preschool, even with the limitations on the space currently available at the high school for preschool.
You're talking about with the scheme A?
I mean, with any given scheme that adds space to the portfolio,
yes,
we could add capacity by shifting around where the other part of RISE is. It's not the high school, or adding a third site or whatever that might look like.
Correct. The one thing you have to be careful is you will have to include that as part of your overall redistricting plan, because what you don't want to start doing is, oh, we have a classroom open in this school this year, so we're going to move RISE over to here, and then next year that classroom's got to get used for elementary, so now you've got to move RISE somewhere else. So the redistricting plan that's put in place in the future would have to account for that.
Right, which is also true in, say, Scheme B, where we moved preschool to the new Killen building, for instance. That would also be true of that. Okay, and then the second question was, in any of these solutions that hypothetically addressed pre-K and pulled it out of the high school building, do we have a sense or sort of a priority that we would use that reclaimed space for? Is there kind of a burning platform to reclaim that space for the high school at this point? Or for administrative offices, or for other programs?
It could be used for administrative offices, or it could be used for high school classrooms for different programs.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron?
So I just sort of a clarifying question on what we are voting on tonight. If I am understanding everything correctly, we can only request work done on one school at a time, correct?
Correct.
And the only thing we need to submit this spring is just a statement of intent that we want to do something major to one school, correct?
Correct. And that was going to be in my presentation.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead, but so we're not choosing between scheme A and scheme B. We're not making any decisions around which students are going where. We're simply saying whether or not we want to move forward.
That's
All
correct.
this does is get your foot in the door.
Okay. And ultimately, when we get a little bit further down, we could re-examine enrollment and what we're building a school for.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Carla?
Thanks, Chuck. So, and I understand that we don't have to decide this tonight, but a question with Scheme B, and it's probably for Dale, with Scheme B with that we would be going for funding from MSBA for Killam, the Killam site, but not for the Birch Meadow site. Does that scheme require that we have both of those sites having construction done at the same time?
No, it does not. So just to clarify, essentially to try to be very clear on something else that was said, you are allowed to put in a statement of interest for more than one project, but MSBA will come back and ask you to prioritize which of those it would be. And for a number of reasons, it would most likely be the Killam. So, and secondly, that the MSBA will only be actively involved with one project with a community at a time. So to clarify for other people that may be listening, there are a number of towns that have multiple school projects going on at one time. Only one of those are being funded by MSBA, and the others are being done without MSBA assistance. So just by math, it makes sense that you would work with MSBA on the larger of the projects. So it kind of leads you to, you know, a statement of interest if you're going to do anything for the Killam site. There will be, you know, this was an overall master plan, which I think has been effective to get us from where could we possibly do what to sort of, you know, zeroing in that the one site seems to make the most sense. The next step, if you go into the MSBA, you know, with a statement of interest, would be a feasibility study to sort out, you know, they will review enrollment, you know, more detailed analysis about the site and the specific building program. So I think there were a couple questions in there. I think I answered both of them. Is that?
Could I do a follow-up, Chuck?
Yeah.
And so Dale, thank you. For the Birch Meadow site, is it the thought that if we applied for the Killam site, got funding, worked through that, and then applied for the Birch Meadow site, is there a thought on whether MSBA would fund that also?
Again, they never say never, but the standing policy is they would not participate in a second project until the first project was built, occupied, and the books closed on it.
Right. Okay.
So, you know, John will get into that, but, you know, just say sitting here, you know, that means, you know, 5 years or more before that second project would even begin to be entered into the program.
Right. Okay.
So,
thank you.
So, Dale, I've beat you up on this before.
Yeah.
Is there no way, no how, fully vetted that we can't somehow make this look like one project for MSBA purposes?
Only by acquiring all the land and making them one site, I suppose. No, it really is. A project is a site, and I've gone through this with MSBA a few times, and that's really what it boils down to. Again, I'm not their spokesman, but we deal with that a great deal, and it's fair to say one site is a project. So the answer to that is no. There's not a way to make them one.
Thank you. Sarah?
Some of my questions are thinking more ahead to the kind of feasibility study piece. But Dale, I had a question around if there's any anticipation around, the square footage requirements changing at any point. It didn't look like, from what I Googled, that they'd changed too frequently. But thinking ahead of, is our capacity that we're planning for going to meet our need as we grow? And then the second half of that question around how accurate the predictions are around enrollment. I know in the past, we've been off, when you start looking out 10 plus years, they've been off here or there by even as much as a couple hundred students.
Right. Well, a lot was done. NESDEC, has a pretty good track record, looking at housing sales and starts and development and how many parcels, how many homes can still be built in town, etc. So they did vet through that. Of course, I don't know if were more babies in the pandemic or not, or will be 9 months after, so things happen. But I mean, I think there's a reasonably good trend that is done, but certain development things in particular can happen that suddenly make a dramatic change. But the space needs, of course, it's involved a great deal, and I don't want to just fault, or say it's all special needs programs, because like, for instance, most of your schools that were redone in the 90s were really built around having the teacher having a computer and probably 2 classrooms in the back of the classroom that the student shared. And of course, now the model is completely different, with everybody having an iPad or etc. So those technology things, we don't seem to be a revolutionary new thing, but the last 15 years, it really has been sort of this trend of around 190 square feet. So it might increase somewhat, but it's probably reasonable level for the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Tom, did you want to read the?
Sure. So 2 questions in here, one for Dr. Doherty and one for Dale. Ed Ross, FinCom, Kensington Avenue. For Dr. Doherty, does the date of the MSBA application between 4/20 and June, if we apply earlier, does it matter? So that might be better asked later, I think, in the conversation. But the second one is for Dale. Clarification: there isn't a Killam replacement that will solve a pre-K movement from high school. I think that goes on top of Sean's question. So just a pure Killam replacement will not solve our pre-K movement. Is that correct, Dale?
Well, I don't. Yes, I do not think you can build a school large enough at Killam to accommodate all of the growth and the preschool and the pre-K. I think by the time you get to that number of students, there's not enough space left for parking, play fields, etc.
Okay, thank you.
And Tom, just to answer, there is no advantage of getting it in April 20th or June 25th.
Thank you, John.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to your portion, John.
Okay. So most of you've seen piece of this before. So on, but we have received some additional information lately from MSBA. April 20th, they will open up their statement of interest process for the school districts. We definitely could participate in this process if we choose to. There are actually 2 programs with MSBA. One is the Accelerated Repair Program, which we have participated in the past. We attempted a couple of years ago to apply under this for a boiler at the high school. Unfortunately, we were not successful. That has a deadline of June 1st. And then the statement of interest date that we're looking at is the core program, if we were going to move forward for the Killam piece, and that would be for extensive repairs, renovations, addition, renovations, and new schools. And that's the June 25th date that I was referring to earlier. So the next steps is once the window opens up, we will get access to the Statement of interest process application. We have not seen that application yet. We get a password that then we're able to enter if we're going to apply. What we would, as Dale mentioned earlier, the MSBA usually only funds one project at a time from a given municipality. What we would need to do to submit is we need school committee, select board, and town manager approval. So this would be the first step. And then the statement of interest, and this is an example, and this is something that Dale recommended, is submit to replace the Killam Elementary School to solve the programmatic and enrollment issues and any additional infrastructure issues. Once we submit, we will be in the pipeline to be considered for a project. It doesn't mean anything more than that. There's no funding commitment that we have to make at this point, but that's where we would be. My guess is, and again, a lot of these steps in the timeline are going to be based on everything that's going on right now. Last year's were delayed because of the pandemic. So once the statement of interest is delivered, the MSBA Board of Directors will most likely vote in late fall, early winter. And then once we receive a positive vote, then the 270-day period officially begins for the first phase. So this is called Modular 1. So you file the statement of interest. And then Modular 1, there's a series of steps during the eligibility period that would lead to getting approval for local authorization of funding for Modular 2. So I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail, but here's the big picture. So Modular 1 is the eligibility period. You do get some authorization for funding at that point for a feasibility study and a schematic design. That would enter you into Modulars 2, 3, 4. Once those steps are done, it would take you to Module 5, where you would have to get full funding for the construction costs of the project. And then you would go into, once the funding is approved, it would then go into Modulars 6, 7, and 8, which would lead to the completion of the project. There are a set number of days that have been put aside for each of these steps. Some of these do overlap. Approximately, we're talking about a 3.5-year period, although that could take a little bit longer based on the steps. So to go through what happens if it is submitted this year, what we would see is April, May, the school committee would vote on an option for SOI, and that's would be this evening. Statement of interest is filed by June 25th. By the fall or winter, MSBA invites Reading into the process, assuming we get approved. If MSBA votes Reading into the process, at that point, you could start holding community forums to get feedbacks on the different options and to educate the community on the steps in the process. If Reading is invited, there would be a few steps. This was that first modular piece that we were talking about. There'd be an initial compliance certification that need to be submitted. The formation of the school building committee at this point, which I will go into the membership in the next slide. There is a comprehensive educational profile questionnaire that needs to be submitted, which includes also the existing maintenance practices plan. And then there'd be an enrollment certification as to, one of the reasons why you would be applying. And then you would need to get commitment of community funding for the feasibility study piece. So if we were to follow that, there would need to be a closing of the warrant article in February of 2022 for April town meeting for a feasibility study. And then assuming that that goes through, late April of 2022 town meeting would approve the funding for the feasibility study and the schematic design, which I'll get into an approximate cost in a minute. And then once that happens, the board of directors would authorize us an invitation to the feasibility study, and it would authorize the MSBA executive director to enter into a feasibility study agreement. This would be the requirements by MSBA for school building committee membership. This would include at this point the permanent building committee members. In addition to that, or as part of that, you would need a member that is MCPPO certified for procurement purposes, the chief financial officer, the town manager, at least one school committee member, the superintendent, the director of facilities, the representative of the office that is authorized by law to construct school buildings, the school principal of the building that of the site, a member that is knowledgeable in educational mission and function of the facility, member of the finance committee, and then members of the community with architecture, engineering, and/or construction experience. So those are the minimum requirements that would be on the school building committee membership. So this now brings us to the May 2022 timeline. So you go out for procurement and request for the services. There'd be a selection of an owner's project manager. You would have a designer also selected, and you'd have to go through the procurement process to make that happen. Now it takes us into phase 3, which is the actual feasibility study. So in the feasibility study, the things that are looked at in a little bit more detail is the educational program, the initial space study. So this goes into more depth than the master plan that has been done by GNAP architects. We would document the existing conditions if it's a renovation, establish the design, develop and evaluate alternatives, and then recommend the most cost-effective and educationally appropriate design to MSBA. MSBA also has model school plans, which could be used as part of this process. This brings us into phase 4, which would be from May 2023 to August 2023. The schematic design. So this would be really going into great detail of the actual plans to establish the scope, budget, and schedule for the project. And then an agreement would be developed and generated by MSBA. We would then need to go to the board of directors for their consideration. And then this would lead to the funding piece, which is phase 5, where you would get a town meeting approval and possible, at that point, a debt exclusion override. And if both are successful, the final design begins. So that brings us to November 2023. Again, this is all assuming everything goes smoothly and according to plan. So then the final design begins. You go through the bid process between July and October of 2024. Construction would begin in October 2024. Because this would be, again, presuming it would be a kiln, decisions would need to be made at that point as what you do with the students. Is construction being done at the same time as school is in session, that type of thing, or a student's going to be relocated. And then, again, if all goes well, we're looking at a September 2026 completion of the project, new school opening. Looking at the 2021 cost estimates, modules 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are your schematic design and your feasibility study. It's approximately $1.7 million. For 5, 6, 7, 8, this would be $67 million, and that would be for the construction of the school. And then looking at option B, as Dale was mentioning earlier, if the choice is to construct Killam and then later do Birch Meadow, we would not be able to submit the Birch Meadow to MSBA as an SOI until Killam was completed. So if you look at January 2027-ish, which is when usually the MSBA process opens up, you're looking at a completed construction, assuming again everything goes according to plan, of 2030 or 2031. And then what if we do not submit an SOI this year? It would delay everything by at least a year. But then some decisions are going to need to be made on how do we solve some of the infrastructure changes that do need to be made to Killam. And some of this does, once we start making changes to Killam, it kicks in other changes, which Dale or Joe Huggins could more eloquently talk about. Once you reach certain cost thresholds, you then have to put in for handicap accessibility, ADA compliance. But some of the things that do need addressing at Killam is putting in a fire suppression system, a lead pipe replacement. The gymnasium is smaller, window and door replacement, and main office renovation. Those would be the key areas that would need to be addressed if Killam is not going to be moved forward for a building project at some point. So that's a breakdown of the timeline.
John, do you have on that last slide you just had up there where, I mean, that's essentially the slide that says if we don't get approved, those are the things that we need to do right away or very soon anyway. Do you have a sense as to what those cost?
I defer to Dale or Joe on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the kind of question anyone hates to answer, but I'll try to do my best. You know, looking at many MSBA projects that try to not do a renovation and, you know, replace systems as needed, and,
yeah,
you know, so, but as John said, you start to do certain things, and just to cite a couple of examples, you hit a certain threshold. Now you put in fire protection, you have asbestos, you know, containing ceiling tile. So you start. So when I look at, you know, comparable projects, you know, it's easy to see those school projects start being $200 to $300 per square foot. You know, and you have roughly a 60,000 square foot school. So I could easily imagine, you know, that becoming $15 to $25 million type of, it's that kind of ballpark.
Thank you. So I think I had Sean up first.
Yeah, so I have a few questions. So John, maybe I'm being dense, but I feel like there were several slides that said we choose an option first and then submit a statement of intent. Is that the case or not? Or are the two schemes substantially similar enough that the same statement of intent would suffice regardless of which one we land on? So what you would be doing tonight is directing us, if you're going to vote in the affirmative, for us to submit a statement of interest to replace the Killam Elementary School. Okay, got it. So that's the option. When I meant option, that's what I was referring to. Okay, got it. And then, so just to confirm, you had that slide that talked about modules 1 through 4 or 1.7 million. That's essentially, if we get to the point where we, you know, go for MSBA approval and we don't get accepted for some reason, that's essentially the sunk cost, and then we have to decide as a town whether we fund it wholly or don't move forward potentially. Correct. Okay, and then the last question I had, never mind. I'll hold the last question because it's not relevant if we don't have to lean on an option tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Aaron?
I'm sorry. Can I?
Yes, Dale.
I think if I didn't hear that come out, what I think was correct. So if you would apply to MSBA and say be accepted into the program if the statement of interest and so on. And you would go through a number of steps through module 1 of the committee, etc., and you would get a decision whether you were accepted into the MSBA program. So at that point, you've incurred some cost, but you've not had to make a significant appropriation. If you appropriated the 1.7 million and went further, that's not a situation where the MSBA may back out at that point. So in other words, you haven't spent 1.7 million to find out if MSBA accepts you into the program. You have done that work. Now the town still has to decide to fund the rest of that. But I thought I heard that differently.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I missed it. I thought that's what Sean was saying. Sorry.
No, he did.
No, I definitely was thinking about it the other way. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Dale. Aaron?
So my question is, when MSBA, or if MSBA lets us know that they're moving forward with us, at that same time, are they telling us what % of the project they will fund?
I'm going to defer to Dale on this, because there are certain things you can do to increase your % reimbursement.
Yeah, correct. I think it's correct to say that you would know fairly close, but you might not know exactly. John, for instance, mentioned that there is a model school program, and just for people who may not be aware, that essentially that means that they have several schools that have been built and for one reason or another are, felt to be applicable to other sites readily. And you gain a couple, I think it's 2% or so, if you choose a model school and go forward with it, because it's, it's not completely designed from scratch, etc. There's better known cost. So there's a number of factors that I think will still occur during basically the schematic design phase, and that, and that those steps that might tweak that a little bit. But you would have a pretty good sense by when you started into that path.
Okay, so essentially, before we start incurring major costs, and definitely before we put anything before the voters, we would know what is being covered and what Reading would have to cover.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Well, just to, so for instance, you're going to do this feasibility study for the Killam School. So based on what we're talking about, if you voted that direction, during that process, it will come out more clear whether all of the students could be accommodated at Killam. So it possibly the project could get a little smaller or so, but it would set that direction. Yes.
But MSBA works in percentages, right? Or do they work in set dollar amounts?
It's a combination. There are certain things that are not eligible for reimbursement. And then for those portions that are, there is a percentage. And so usually when people talk about what % was reimbursable, they're usually talking about, the total math when it's all done. But there are certain things that are excluded, and just, for people like landscaping, I think is one of the items, so it's things that are really quite optional, and some towns may elect to just do more or less. As you're familiar from your other projects, administrative offices are not reimbursable. So not that that's part of this project, but there are some of these things that are not directly related to the core curriculum or the essence of an elementary school that are excluded, that you may or may not have in your project, but the rest works on percentage.
Thank you.
Tom?
Thanks, Chuck. John and Dale, thank you. John, in your timeline where you were talking about if we approve today and then we file by the 25th, you also had previously mentioned we need to get the select board and the town manager's approval. Have we already talked with Mr. LeLasher to get it on an agenda item, presuming we do approve today for some time in early May, so that we can make sure we have their approval lined up as well?
We have not yet.
So you're waiting for our approval before you do that? Yeah. Okay. He's clearly aware of the project because we've had plenty of conversations on that front. Right. But okay. And I guess the other question I have is, well, there's a lot of other questions I have, but the next one would be, this year's MSBA answers came back very, very late. I think they're still answering right now as we talk. Right. So you're assuming in the timelines right now that we'll get an answer late fall or early December, I guess, of this year, based upon how you're forecasting these timelines. But is it fair to say it's potentially possible that we may not get an answer until, Q1 or even early Q2 next year as well?
Yeah, that's true. The pandemic obviously slowed down last year's process, but yeah, all that timeline that I gave you was tentative.
Okay, but then the 270-day clock starts once they approve us, right? Correct. It doesn't start before that.
Correct.
So all of Module 1, the eligibility period, all of that starts only after they approve us.
Correct.
So as long as they don't approve us in a period that boxes us out of either April town meeting or November town meeting, we're gonna work towards one of those town meetings for the local authorization funding that takes us to 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Next question is on the composition of the committee for the school building committee. There seem like a lot of the roles here could overlap, could be one person. So it's not necessarily that we're going to have, 10 or 12 or 14 people in that committee necessarily. We just have to say this person checks this box, this person checks this box, this person checks this box.
Yes.
Right. So like MCPBPO and the chief financial officer could very well be the same person.
Yes.
Right.
And
okay.
In your permanent building committee, your current existing permanent building committee could have multiple roles as well.
Right. Right. And they, if I recall correctly, don't need to have the entire permanent building committee on this committee. They would have representation of the permanent building committee on this committee.
That I'm not sure of.
I thought I looked through the bylaws and that's
I'm not sure how the bylaws work, but that could be true.
That all comes after the so we don't need to get down into that tonight.
Okay. Okay, so then I guess, just to piggyback off of Aaron's question about the cost percentage, I appreciate the kind of jumping around it, and it is kind of a vague question or answer, but I think historically we've received like a 53% or so, give or take, and obviously it depends upon the design things that we look at. But if we look at 67 million, we'd be looking at potentially trying to have the town fund 32 of that, give or take, if this holds the way it's holding out right now. A lot can change between now and then, but that would be generally the ask. We'd somewhere in that range we'd be looking at.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just in full disclosure, because something had gotten whited out on that slide. The 66 million is construction cost at present, and there's about an additional 10 million that's total project cost. So that's furniture, computer networking, fees, all of that. So the total cost number that you're looking at, if you start talking percentages, is more like 78 than 66. So that doesn't appear to be a change later.
Okay. So potentially up to 41, 42 million, then we'd be asking the town to fund. Okay. All right. That was my question, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay. Sean?
Yeah, sorry, just one more. John, on the high-level timeline you had, you talked about it in the instance where we don't do the Birch piece now and tried to do Birch later. I think you had like the January 27, that window opens, and we're looking at a 30 or 31 opening for that. Is there a reason? Can you help me understand why that process would look like more? Would look more like 3 to 4 years instead of 5 to 6 years from statement of intent to opening for the Killen project?
That was a guesstimate, Sean,
okay,
based on the timelines from the MSBA.
Okay. So but fair to say that's, absolute best case. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Was that all that was your presentation? So,
Yes.
Pat, did you have something you want to say? Hi, Pat.
Yeah,
Gary.
just had to unmute myself. Yeah, just wanted to make a couple of comments. This is Pat Tompkins. I'm the chair of the Permanent Building Committee. The team has presented to us a couple of times. We've sat in on a bunch of their presentations, and we weren't part of obviously the data gathering process, but we've been on the periphery. And we just want, as a representative of the building committee, we just want to let everyone know that we think it's been a very thoughtful process done by GNAP and John Doherty, Gail, and Joe Huggins, the people at facilities, as well as the school committee and your predecessors. It was a very detailed process, a very thorough process. They did a really good job of vetting different options, really thinking through, could you do something at Barrows? So we just wanted to let you know we have been involved. It hasn't been officially a building committee project, but we've been involved, and it has been a really good process that the team has gone through to get to the point they're at right now.
Thank you, Pat.
More of a statement than a question.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we're ready for a motion.
Sure. So I move to direct the superintendent to submit a statement of interest for the MSBA core program to replace the Killam School to solve the programmatic space and enrollment issues at the preschool and elementary level and infrastructure issues at Killam.
Is there a second?
Second.
And any other questions or discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call. Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And Chuck, aye. Thank you, Dale and Sarah and Joe and Pat and John. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, we're doing the spring in-person update early tonight.
Yes, we are. We're trying to to respect staff time. We're trying to do all of the staff
Absolutely.
information at the beginning of the meeting to allow them to leave if they would like to. Okay, so we're continuing to move forward. Things are the very positive, I would say, in everything that's going on as we prepare for the next round of full in person at the middle and high school. First, as I have been going, I want to go over some health and safety data. We've been lately averaging 1 or 2 students a day of positive cases. Some of this is coming from our pool testing, and others are coming from community notifying us. So we are seeing more of a steady 1 to 2 students a day now. Today we had a positive case at Killam. Staff cases have been very low, and I know this just shows March, but if you extrapolated this into April, we are continuing to see very few positive staff cases per day, which obviously is good. And part of the reason for that, which you'll see later, is the number of staff that are now getting close to full vaccination. So our positive cases this week so far, and again, I just want to put out a kudos to our nursing staff, led by Mary, for all the great work that they're doing. We had 2 positive high school pools this week in athletics. The freshman volleyball team was quarantined, and 13 of the boys track team was quarantined as a result of those positive pools. We did have a positive pool at Killam. 18 students and 2 staff were quarantined as a result of that, and a positive case at Killam. 20 students and 2 staff were quarantined. When you take a look at the total number of cases since the beginning of the school year, and they have been rising since the last time. Obviously, we met on April 1st. Our total cases are spread out across the 3 levels. Highest is at the high school, and the quarantine levels, the highest is at the elementary. In terms of pool testing, we are seeing an increase of the number of families that are opting into pool testing, which is great. One thing we learned this week from DESE is that they are funding the pool testing for the remainder of the school year, but now they're going to increase it through the summer programs. So we will obviously work with Mary and the testing company to be able to continue that for our ESY programs and our other programs that we're going to be holding this summer in our schools. So far, we've done 1,213 pools since February 28th. 14 have tested positive. We've had 3 inconclusive. The turnaround time has been amazing lately. It's less than 24 hours. We'll send pools testing out mid-morning or even early afternoon, and we're getting it back very early the next morning. And the advantage to that is we're able to notify families early enough so that they can get the Binax testing done. We're really, right now, we're doing the Binax testing the same day that we're hearing about the results, which is good. And that reflex testing is being done by our school nurses. So as I mentioned, here's the percent of students by school that are participating in the pool testing program. Our high school has seen a tremendous jump. We're up to 84% of the students, and I believe that has a lot to do with the extracurricular and athletic participation that we have of our students. And then if you take a look at staff, this was as of yesterday. I'm sorry, today. 71.7% of our staff are participating in pool testing. So obviously, the higher the numbers, the better it is overall for the whole school community. The vaccination, you could see here, we added a question this time, or an option that it's been 2 weeks or more since they've had their full vaccination is the option that we've now added, or it's been less than 2 weeks since they've had their full vaccination, because technically someone is not fully vaccinated until they have the 2-week period after they get their first or their 1 shot or their 2nd shot of a 2-shot. But you can see that with the red and the blue, within 2 weeks, we're going to have 81% of our staff, or approximately 81% of our staff will be fully vaccinated. We have another 14.3% that have had 1 dose. So overall, we have 95.7% of our staff at some stage of the vaccination process, which is amazing. I was also told today by Mary Juliana that 229 of our students have been now vaccinated, at least have had 1 shot. And the significance of this is it allows our students not to have to quarantine once they are fully vaccinated if they're a close contact. So the reason why we have so many students, because you're probably thinking, well, I thought April 19th was when the everyone was eligible, is because we do have a lot of students who work and would be eligible under other categories. So that's amazing that we have that many students already vaccinated at the high school. So Chuck, I don't know if you want me to stop here first, take any questions?
Sure. Any questions from the committee?
Okay.
Good, John.
I'll move on. Just very quickly, just want to reemphasize to everyone that once we are fully in person, all of the mitigation strategies are going to continue. The only thing that will change will be the physical distancing, which will be in some cases lower than 6 feet. Looks like we're averaging 4.5 feet in the school district, depending on the school and the class size. Elementary began on April 5th. It's been going very, very well. Again, I want to thank our staff, our building principals, facilities, health, food service. It's been a complete team effort to get our elementary back full in person. We're now waiting for the second round, which will begin Monday, the 26th. That will be full school days. The MCAS testing period has now, the eligibility and has now changed, so we no longer have to have those remote Fridays at the high school. The only remote Friday that will be happening, will I believe will be April 30th, is for the YRBS questionnaire that our students will be taking. Some other updates that I want to give you, and I know Kerry Meisinger will be talking more about the other searches, but we did send this out this afternoon. We are pleased to announce that Kevin Tracy is going to be the next principal at Reading Memorial High School. For those of you that may not know, Kevin is currently the principal at the John Glenn Middle School in Bedford. He also served for 6 years as the assistant principal at Bedford High School, and he was a teacher of social studies at North Andover High School. Over the last several weeks, these candidates that have been finalists have gone through a very rigorous process, 2 screening committees, then a public process of staff open mic, community open mic, and then this week we had a round of in-person interviews, which consisted of myself, Dr. Milicheski, Gail Dowd, Jen Stice, and a student from Reading Memorial High School who did an amazing job. He stole the show with his thought-provoking questions. And then we did site visits over the last couple of days as well to the different sites of the 3 finalists and talked to parents, to students, community members, and staff and administrators. So it was a very rigorous process. And at the end, Kevin Tracy stood out as the candidate that we believe is the best match for Reading Memorial High School with the skill sets that he has, his vision for what a high school should look like and where it should go, and the work he has done with social justice and equity at John Glenn Middle School and in Bedford. So we're very pleased to welcome Kevin to the Reading Memorial High School family and to the Reading community. Kerry's going to talk a little bit about the other searches that are underway. And my thank you for this evening is going to go out to Team Chair Kelly Decato. Kelly has been doing a lot of things lately. One is she is a team chair at 2 schools, at Woodend and at Barrows. And she also, because we have been a little bit short-handed lately until recently with a BCBA. So Kelly has been pinch hitting and providing BCBA services during the transition as we've hired a new BCBA. And she also did a great presentation the other night at our CPAC meeting on MCAS alt and accommodations for students with disabilities on the MCAS. And so thank you this evening goes out to Kelly and all of the work that she's doing on in special education, reaching out to the community and with students and parents in the Reading Public Schools. Now a little bit of students. This is the Joshua Eaton Elementary School. Students are doing some mindfulness activities as part of a social emotional break. This is a bulletin board right outside of the Joshua Eaton School Nurse Office on different facts on health and body. We have a writing activity. I believe this is Miss McQuillan's class, I think. Switching over to Barrows, this was Spirit Week. So they had students that dressed up in all kinds of different costumes. You can see here, as part of Spirit Week, they also had Formal Day. And students were dressed in their formal attire, and O'Connor Studios took pictures on the steps of different classes, which will be shared with families. Moving to the high school, spring sports, fall 2 sports are underway. This is our girls volleyball team. This is the senior night for the team, and you can see the parents watching their seniors in the background. It's also our volleyball team. Track and field, actually this is indoor track, even though it's outdoors. Outdoor track doesn't start till a week from Monday. Our cheerleading squad and our football team. So we've had a very successful fall 2 season. When we first saw all that snow on the ground just before it was supposed to start, we didn't know how successful it was going to be, but overall it turned out to be a very successful fall season. There is a few more games this week. I believe the football game against Lincoln Sudbury is going to be Friday night. It's the last game of the year. I'm sorry. No, they're playing Lincoln Sudbury. Is it? Or maybe it's next Friday.
That's next week.
Sorry, next Friday. Sorry about that. That will be a 5 o'clock start. I'm trying to add another section to my updates, and it's called highlights, which highlights some of the different things that are going on. So I'm going to shift to Coolidge Middle School. The next 3 slides. Coolidge Middle School 8th grade are doing as part of their civics curriculum, is doing a problem that they would solve or present to town meeting. So what this was involved is traffic flow and the use of imagination station for a general purpose. So students created different problems and different solutions to those problems. So you could see that was the problem on parking, a discussion of the problem using aerial photographs. This is the imagination station site, and then possible solutions of traffic flow in terms of dropping students off in the morning to reduce the Birch Meadow Drive traffic or creating additional parking for that area. Some other highlights that I do want to mention. Reading Memorial High School seniors. We have several students that are involved in the internship program where they are going out to elementary and middle schools to work in classrooms in any capacity that would benefit the students or the school. This is a program that's being funded by DESE. So we applied for a grant in the winter, received the grant, and Katie Fiorello, who is the wellness department chair, is overseeing this program and is working with the principals at the other schools where the students would go and work with different classrooms. So it's been a very successful program. Dr. Stice is going to be posting soon different segments of the reading presentation that was done a few weeks ago at a special meeting of the CPAC in the Reading Public Schools. And the Dyslexia Guidelines were released by DESE last week. And I think what's important about this in reaffirming to the work that Dr. Stice and her team and others, Allison Straker, have been doing, is that when these guidelines first came about, and it's a result of Chapter 272, it was enacted and that took effect in 2019. And what the chapter said was that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, in consultation with the Department of Early Education and Care, shall issue guidelines to assist districts in developing screening procedures to identify and support students with indicators of a neurological learning disability. This past week, it was just issued by DESE. We were thrilled once we saw the guidance because it was aligned to the work that we were already doing in this district. The stakeholders on the team developing the guidance included Adam Hickey from Landmark Outreach and Melissa Orkin and Leandra Elion from Crafting Minds. Those are programs that have been doing professional development in Reading. And additionally, one of the resources listed include Equipped for Reading Success by David Kilpatrick, which Reading has purchased for each school. The book has been part of a book study this year and has proved to be a great resource for staff. The guidance focuses on strategic planning and the role that multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, and screening for students at risk of dyslexia and providing appropriate instruction. Our district is currently utilizing Michael McSheehan from Evolve and Effect LLC to facilitate a group of elementary general education and special education teachers and administrators to analyze and make suggestions to improve Reading's MTSS process. DESE intends for this guidance to be a living document and an evolving document, and it will be a source of direction and support and aligns with Reading's Reading and Literacy District Improvement Plan goal. So I want to highlight some of those things that have been going on in the district. We'll continue to do that. There's a lot of good things happening in our school district that we should be proud of, in spite of the challenges that we have faced since last March with the pandemic. So that's my spring update.
Thank you, John. Very, very good. Tom had there's a public comment.
John, if you wouldn't mind, it was going back to your staff vaccination slide. Sure. Jeffrey Corum of Ridge Road says, I'm concerned about the purple pie wedge, teachers who have not been able to schedule a vaccination. Can you comment more?
It could be also teachers that are choosing not to get a vaccine. It could be either.
Yep.
We have sent out separate surveys to reach out to those teachers that were struggling to get appointments. And I believe that we've been able to, between either us working with the town or through individual teachers or parents that have been doing the sign up, have anyone that wants to sign up, I think we've been able to get them that sign up access.
Right.
Chuck, there are two more comments that, if we're done with this section, probably would be good to finish out or close out before we go into other things.
Yep.
So the first one, going back to the study, I missed it before, but I think it was sort of answered, so I'll put it out there. Jeffrey Corum, Ridge Road, Scheme A has a higher total capacity, but does not address pre-K. What are those extra students? And he's referring to Scheme A has 220 students, Scheme B has 2,020 students, and Scheme B has 2,000 students. I think this is part of Sean's question, so I think it's more or less addressed. And then the last one is Becca Lieberman, 50 Pratt Street. I urge you to restore some of the opportunities that have been taken away from our students in recent years, including virtual high school courses and a pathway for non-top track math students to gain access to the middle school algebra and high school calculus. I'm a former RMHS parent and a current METCO host parent, and I've seen firsthand some of the opportunities that my oldest child's class had, which are now gone. I'm also a college interviewer for a competitive school, and I get to see what learning opportunities students in other schools and districts have that Reading does not. Just for one example is that Reading only offers one AP computer science course when there used to be many more. And most districts provide access to middle school algebra for a much higher percentage of students than Reading does. I also think it should be an urgent priority to create opportunities for summer learning for all students, such as online or in-person learning opportunities, summer work packets, and lists of educational resources to help our students catch up on some of the learning they have missed during the pandemic. I also think there should be more summer reading required, ideally associated with writing assignments or two. We can't let our students fall any further behind.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks again, John. We'll now move on to the HR report. And Carrie. Hi, Carrie.
Hi there. Thank you. So my third quarter report is in a memo form in your packet. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. First off, I just wanted to talk about how we're moving forward with the diversity recruitment initiatives. So I attended a virtual job fair on March 31st that was sponsored by the Massachusetts Partnership for Diversity in Education. And I just wanted to thank Dr. Stice and Dr. Doherty for participating in that job fair. So this was a interesting experience. I have never done a career fair in a virtual setting, but it was still an effective way to kind of showcase our employment opportunities in Reading and chat live with candidates who are interested in our district. And post the event, we've received a complete list of participants, so a complete list of candidates who attended the event, along with their credentials and contact information, which is helpful so that we can review that list alongside our future openings. And if we find that there are folks who may be qualified, we can reach out to them directly and encourage them to apply. I'll be continuing to work with the MPDE in the upcoming monthly meetings, just to talk about additional strategies for diversity recruitment and best practices. So in addition, we have partnered with diversityjobs.com, again, to create a greater sort of advertising presence and kind of try to attract more candidates with diverse backgrounds. This is an online recruitment tool, and we will have unlimited postings on their website over the next 12 months. They will do the work of pulling the postings from our website and uploading them twice a day. The postings that appear on the website also will appear on their partner websites. For example, blackcareers.org is one of the partnerships that they will have access to, and that we will have access to through them. So this is a nice feature. It allows applicants to register to get new job alerts emailed directly to them. And it gives us as an employer the opportunity to monitor our job postings and to look at statistics around how many times a particular job is viewed by candidates and how many times the application button is clicked on. So that's important data to be able to evaluate over the course of time to determine if this tool is really effective and if it's something that we want to continue to pursue. We'll also get access to a resume database with over 6,000 candidates who are looking for work. And again, that will be helpful in terms of trying to align our current needs with some of the candidates' qualifications and doing some direct outreach there. So in addition to that, we continue to partner with METCO, who has been wonderful in posting our job opportunities on their website as well. So we've taken some additional steps over the last couple of months to really try to move forward and market ourselves, as an employer that values diversity in our staff. So Dr. Doherty had mentioned that I have some updates about the administrative searches that are underway. As he mentioned, Kevin Tracy has been selected as the next principal of Reading Memorial High School, and we are very excited about that. We have the Parker Assistant Middle School principal position. I understand that the screening committee completed interviews for that position last Friday, and Principal Shanklin will be, I think, making a recommendation very shortly to the superintendent for a candidate. So we expect an announcement in the near future about that position. The screening committee for the Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Teaching had its second meeting earlier this afternoon. We met to develop some questions for the upcoming interviews, which are scheduled to take place on April 29th. We've had a lot of interest in this position. Dr. Doherty can speak to the numbers of applications that we've received, but it looks as though we may need 2 days of interviews, given the number of applicants, which is good news. So the Birch Meadow Elementary School Principal Screening Committee had its first meeting this week. We just had an introductory session, and we'll be working over the next couple of weeks to develop questions for candidates, and we are scheduled to conduct interviews on May 6th. And our METCO Director Screening Committee is being led by Principal Ippolito and Principal Hendricks, and I understand they've already sent out surveys both to the community and to the staff, and the first meeting of the committee is scheduled for April 26th. The interviews for candidates will be happening on May 14th. So those are just some of the highlights from the report. Happy to try to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. Are there any questions from the committee? Sean?
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Carrie. Just one question about the one of the tables in your memo was the new LOAs in the quarter, and it was, I think it was 9.6 FTEs. Do you have any sense, just ballpark, did we have, I assume, folks returning from LOAs during the quarter as well, like what that net looks like?
So I don't immediately have the numbers on folks who are returning. Some of the leaves that are reflected in the table are short-term leaves for medical purposes or short-term parental leaves. But I can certainly look at that data and provide that to you, Sean.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.
And Gail.
Great. Thank you very much. I will try to be as brief as I can. There is a memo in the packet that went out today, and I do want to first acknowledge that in the first table on the chart, there is a typo on it. All of the figures on here do reflect the FY21 budget. I inadvertently called it the FY20 budget. I guess COVID has made me lose track of which year we're in. So I did want to acknowledge that, and I will fix that going forward. The approach I took doing this update is to try to add a lot of detail around various savings that we've had, any areas where we may have had additional expenditures, and also to highlight areas where we're utilizing the grant funding as effectively as we can. So as you know, we've had currently the ESSER grant, we have the COVID relief grant, and we also have some additional state funding that we received late in the year. We are looking at all of our expenses to ensure that we are utilizing that funding to the best ability we have. The majority of that funding has to be used for expenses that were not already included in your budget. So I cannot put items that were in our budget on any of these grants, and any funds you do utilize have to be directly tied to COVID. So I did want to let folks know that there are certain restrictions, but we are looking at every opportunity we can to utilize that funding. And I've highlighted some of that throughout here. The other item that we're doing is, as we are seeing pockets of money, whether it be from salary savings. As you've heard throughout the year, we have had a lot of positions that have been open, remained open. We've had instances in which timing differences when the position was opened and when it was filled, along with salary differences of when folks are coming in or out. We're looking to strategically repurpose that fund in order to do curriculum purchases, technology purchases. We're also looking at savings we've had in our athletics and extracurricular areas to do some strategic purchases within those areas as well, because we feel that that is the best use of our funds. In regards to some of the revolving accounts, we've been stating throughout the year, as well as during our budget process, that we continue to closely monitor all of our revolving accounts. We have previously discussed the extended day revolving account. You did see we made adjustments to the offset for next year due to the decreased enrollment that we've had this year, as well as some of the staffing costs that we carried in the beginning part of the year. We've also mentioned that use of school property, pretty much we have not rented any of our facilities since March 13th, 2020. So there is no additional revenue coming into that fund at this time, or if there is, it's very small. It's mostly tied to renting some of our outdoor space to the extent they're not being utilized by athletics. We also, within the athletics revolving account, as we've discussed, we have reduced the student fees. This year, we're charging 75% of the typical fee. So that is reducing the amount of revenue going into the revolving account. The other aspect that we've seen this year is due to the impact of COVID-19, we have not been able to allow spectators. So traditionally, we have had gate receipts for football, hockey, basketball. We do not have any of that revenue this year. So what I wanted to articulate for the group, which was not as clear in the memo, is that when we're looking to reduce the offsets this year, it is because we do not have the revenue coming into the funds this year to support that offset. So it's not so much that we're trying to preserve the balances, it's just that the revenue itself is not coming in. So that's why you'll see we're looking to reduce some of those offsets in the current year, tied directly to the reductions in revenue. So hopefully that clarifies some of that. I also did want to let folks know that even though we have, and Dr. Stice can jump in if there are further questions, while we have had staff turnover and timing issues with some of our positions in the paraprofessionals, even throughout the special education call center, we do not owe any missed services due to any of these staffing challenges that we have had. We are continuing to meet all of the service grid requirements for our students on IEP. So I did want to make sure I made that connection. Any compensatory items that come up have been more so related to the COVID-19 and the learning models, and Dr. Stice and I have worked very closely. We did mention earlier in the year that we utilized the COVID grants that we have in order to provide compensatory services. I have to give Dr. Stice and her team it was incredible the amount of work that they got done in the November, December timeframe when we were utilizing up all of our grant funding. She did a phenomenal job. And we are constantly monitoring any new requirements or statements that are coming out from DESE and the state related to COVID compensatory services, and we are monitoring those and ensuring that we're meeting all of those requirements. I'm currently working with people across the district. I've had meetings with Tom Zaya and Anna Wentlant just to give a little bit more detail. And again, a lot of this is preliminary as we're working to look at how to best utilize some of the savings we have in preserving them within their original cost centers. Tom Zaya and I are reviewing the age and condition of our uniforms. As we've talked about, we've started to develop an inventory, aging, and looking at a replenishment cycle. We're currently targeting baseball, softball, and we're also looking at hockey. So those are the 3 areas. This year we're looking, as you may remember, last year we did football and the band uniforms were the 2 big items that we did. In working with Anna Wentland, we are looking across the entire district. We're not just solely focused at the high school. We've asked her to look from pre-K all the way through the high school. I'll see if I can do justice to this. So she has come up with baritone saxophones, concert chimes, digital piano, choral risers at the middle school, tenor saxophone, as well as looking at potential kilns at some of the elementary schools that may not currently have them. So we are doing a holistic approach across the district. And the way we're looking at it is sort of a priority based, what is damaged, what's in need of repair, what hasn't been replaced. So we're really looking through all areas across the district, and we're trying to be fair and equitable about it as well, to go across all schools, all grades. We're also looking at various curriculum items. We have met with Heather and Allison as far as their curriculum needs. We've also met with department heads at the high school. So for the math area, we are currently looking at potentially one middle school, 3 elementary, and 2 high school areas. Again, we're doing the preliminary research, doing up all of the rubrics to look at what's needed, what fits within our budgets. We are looking at, see if I say this right, the world language. I think I might have called it foreign language before, so I will correct that going forward. I believe it is it's world language.
No, it's actually, you had it right.
Oh, did I do it the other?
Yeah, it used to be world language. Now they're
No.
changing it back to foreign.
I'm doing something in language.
No, the state frameworks are changing it back to foreign.
I just learned the new one and I'm going to unlearn it now. So I am working with them on that. I do not have a definitive what grade, what language. We've basically opened it up and said, look at what you have. If you're currently using books, what books need to be replaced? Do we have them all in the correct languages for what they're doing? So we will bring back more information as we have it. What I was trying to do in the memo was give you a broad base to let you know we're looking across the full spectrum of areas. For the revolving accounts, one of the items that I've noted in here that I am requesting to reduce the offset is within the extended day revolving account. While we are seeing increases, so when we went from remote to hybrid to full in-person, the increases, we had about 7 new students enter the extended day program when we came back full in-person. Where we are seeing a little bit of relief within the revolving account is now we have all students here both weeks, whereas before we had cohort A, 1 week, cohort B the next week. We now have both cohorts here, which does increase the revenue because now I have twice as many students bringing in the revenue. We have made small staffing adjustments. I believe we brought back 3 individuals who had previously been employed as part of the program who have been brought back. We are doing it on a needs-based. We have not brought back any of the office staff because we're not quite there yet where we would need to do it. So we are still very closely monitoring this account, and we're not seeing significant increases yet, but we are working very closely. We meet with Chris Nelson on a weekly basis to look at his projections, his revenue, his staffing. So we are assessing that as we go. And we will be continuing to update this projection pretty much almost on a weekly basis now. We're looking at it to make sure any staffing changes. We're actually meeting bright and early tomorrow morning. Dr. Stice, my staff, and her staff are getting together to revisit all of her areas to make sure we have everything captured correctly. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into the figures that we have here. We are asking the committee to approve a couple of budget transfers. And you'll notice that for the regular day, I'm not asking for the full transfer yet because a lot of the items we're just starting to fully vet out now. So we'll most likely come back next month once we have additional figures to ask for any additional transfers. But the revolving account offsets that we're asking the committee to review and approve, the reductions are based upon current figures and where we believe we will be for the year. And I do not anticipate extended day or use of school property to have any type of rebound in the last 2 months of the year. And athletics and extracurricular are based upon estimates going back 2 years to look at what participation rates would have been at a discounted user-free percentage. And I talked very fast, so I apologize if that was too much all at once.
Thank you, Gail. It's a great job. So we'll start with questions first because we have 2 motions. So I'm going to wait for the motions until the end. I just had a question, Gail, with the fall, the spring sports. Are we going to ramp the athletic fee back up to normal or not?
We are not. We have kept it all because each season is still shorter than it would have been under the regular guidelines. Okay. We are keeping them in order to be consistent. We felt that that was the best approach, was to keep it at the 75% for all of the seasons this year due to the shortened nature of them.
I guess I was under the impression that spring was going to be somewhat back to normal.
No, it's less games, Chuck.
Less games? Okay,
yeah.
Sorry. Okay, Sean?
I think Tom beat me to the punch, Chuck.
Tom?
Spring is a little longer and then there's going to be state championships, Chuck, so that's a good thing. Gail, you kind of...
totally wrong.
You're not totally wrong. Gail, you answered so many of my questions, so thank you. I just want one clarifying question on the uniforms, if you don't mind. You mentioned baseball and softball and hockey. Obviously, baseball and softball, it's pretty clear what gender's covered there, but hockey, are we covering both genders or are we only able to cover one?
We're looking to cover both. What I typically, when I do this, I always look to cover both.
Great, thank you. Everything else you already answered, so thank you for going through it in such detail.
Okay, Sean.
Okay, so Gail, just two questions. One's really a clarification, just to make sure I understand correctly. I'll admit I had a brief panic attack when I saw the $1.25 million surplus in special education. But just make sure I understand it. Over $1 million of that is we prepaid tuition that was not reflected in the budget of $750,000. And we have $250,000 or so in additional circuit breaker. Okay.
That is exactly correct.
Okay, good. And then the second thing was, so we're taking some reductions to the offsets for revolving accounts here, which makes sense. I think we all understand the dynamics of why that's necessary. Do you have any sense, or maybe I don't know if we can look at it in a future meeting, where we expect to end up with sort of year-end balances in the revolving funds and what the implications of that for next year will be?
Yes, absolutely. I started to pull that together now. The tricky part with athletics and extracurricular particularly is I still have, I'm going to call them seasons, 2 seasons that I do not have the user fees in yet. So the next update, I should have the majority of that in. Kindergarten and Rise are in very good shape because the majority of those fees have been collected. So, and then extended day, we had been billing a month in arrears. We're going to go back to how we had been doing it historically, which is to bill upfront. So that will help us with that as well. But yes, I can do that for the next update, Sean.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Thanks again, Gail. You always take the wind out of our sails.
Thanks, Gail.
I try to anticipate as many questions or address items that folks reach out to me about so that we can move through it.
Do we have a motion?
We have two, but we'll start with the first one. Move that the school committee vote to authorize the following cost center transfers to cover the projected deficits. Transfer $50,000 to the administrative cost center from the special education cost center. Transfer $500,000 to the regular education cost center from the special education cost center. Transfer $120,000 to the facilities cost center from the special education cost center.
Second.
Excuse me, any questions? Okay, seeing none. Aaron?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay.
Motion number two. Move that the school committee vote to authorize the following changes in the revolving account offsets. Reduce the offset from the extended day revolving account by $150,000. Reduce the offset from the use of school property revolving account by $80,000. Reduce the budgeted offset from the RMHS extracurricular revolving account by $10,000 and the Coolidge Drama and Parker Drama revolving accounts each by $4,500. Reduce the budgeted offset from the athletics revolving account by $114,900.
Okay, any questions or discussion? Sarah?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Thanks again, Gail.
All right, thank you very much.
So I guess we're going to go on to the policy discussion now, and I wanted to thank, because some of the staff is going to leave now.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank them for participating tonight. So with the policy discussion, I had conversations with the superintendent, Tom Wise, and a lot of the policies that you received are process type orientated policies. So kind of lump those all into a category so that we don't go through each one individually, and then pulled out policy CBI and BDE, which we will read those individually. So if the committee doesn't object, I'm going to ask for a motion on the, and there was a memo in your packet, I believe too, that lists the policies that we're going to read in one motion.
So this is a little out of order in the policy thing, so I'll do the move to accept, and then we'll do the move to waive, Chuck, right?
Yeah.
So move to accept the first reading of the following policies: BDD, ACE, BBA, BBBA/BBBB, BEDA, BEDB, BIA, BIBA, CBD, CE, CHC, and CH.
What about?
I shouldn't have looked down at Aaron laughing at me.
Well, I was going to say you sounded like the Three Stooges, but Sean would Google my age again.
If I don't have to read them out loud, I'll second that motion.
Sean, you don't have to look up the Three Stooges, do you?
No.
All right, so rather than start the reading, the next motion is a move to waive. So I'll try and do this as well without cracking a smile. Move to waive the first reading of the following policies: BDD, ACE, BBA, BBBA, BB, BBB, BEDA, BEDB, BIA,
It's good to laugh.
Yeah. B.
EIBA, CBD, CE, CHC, and CH.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, any other discussion on those? Carla?
Chuck, if there are just two, just spelling or grammatical, can I just send them to?
Yeah.
Yes.
someone?
Just send them to me and Samantha.
Perfect, thank you.
Aaron?
So I actually had feedback or questions on a few of them. Policy BBBA/BBBB.
Yep.
The he, she, can we change that to gender neutral language? So
The
it would be,
version has already done so.
I think we did that.
what do you mean?
There was the second publication, Aaron has changed it to they are and
Oh.
their
In the
official
second,
duties.
yeah,
Oh, it's not redlined that way. I only printed out the red line ones for myself. So in the red line version, it's still, you just added the she, but it's not gender neutral. So did I miss one?
What we did in the second packet that Samantha sent out, we did make some gender changes.
Okay, so I apologize because
that's okay.
Didn't look at these again because I already read them. And then policy BEDB.
Yep.
So it currently says that any school committee member, staff member, or citizen may suggest items of business. The inclusion of such items, however, will be at the discretion of the chair of the committee. Can we consider adding language that if multiple school committee members request an item, then it would go on the agenda?
I think it still has to go to the multiple committee members can request, but I think it's the chair sets the agenda. So are you asking that the multiple school committee members would override the chair? Is that what
Yeah, I'm saying if multiple school committee members requested it, could the chair not say no?
I mean, that's up to the committee, I guess.
It may be something, Chuck, we need to check with legal counsel.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to considering that. I don't know whether we can. I'll have to check.
I believe it's in the select board policy. I don't know if that makes a difference, but.
Doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
So can I chime in on that? Aaron's correct. There is language in select board policy. I understand it's not necessarily telling that we can do it as well, but the language is probably useful to look at. And then if it's legally possible, I would be supportive of that, of pursuing that change as well. So if we could kick the tires on that, that would be great.
Okay. Is that it, Aaron?
Hold on. So policy CE, does that also have gender neutral language?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And policy CHC, again, I apologize if you already corrected this. Some places the word regulation was changed to procedure. Some places there's still regulations in the first line and regulation as the last word. We changed
it.
Okay,
yep.
I'm sorry.
No, you're doing a great job.
All right, I think that was it.
Thank you. Tom?
So I have a couple as well. I guess first on the previous thing, I'm not of the same belief necessarily. I think we should, we elect a chair, we should trust him or her or them to address and hear, whether it's one, whether it's three, whether it's four. That's what we kind of elect them for, is to make those decisions. There's a lot that goes on as well behind those scenes to a degree. So on policy BIBA, it has cross references to two policies that we do not have, BID and DKC.
Yep.
So we should probably either look to include those and do a first reading of those next time, or change the cross references appropriately to be ones that align to what we have.
Okay.
Somewhat similar to what Erin just mentioned about policy CH. She mentioned it in CHC, but CH also still has the word regulations in the second paragraph as opposed to procedures. I think we caught CHC, but we maybe didn't catch CH or accidentally reverted it.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
And those are the two that I had.
Thank you, Tom. Sean?
Thanks, Chuck. John, maybe just more a question for you. I'm looking at BBA, which is on page, looks like 75 in the updated packet. And there's a new section, personnel matters, and it delineates, all the roles that we appoint upon superintendent recommendation. School business administrator in particular, I'm not going to pretend to know sort of the legal definition, but we use a different title. Does that matter? Should we reflect that here?
The licensure.
It's based on the licensure. Okay.
Name, it's called, yeah, it's by the licensure.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Is that it, Sean?
That's it. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll vote on the first reading.
I guess, Chuck, technically we didn't vote on the waiver. We were too busy laughing at the waiver, so we got to vote on the waiver, and then we have to vote on the acceptance of the first reading.
Yep, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Erin?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. And now we'll vote on the first reading. Erin?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And Chuck? Aye. Okay. So now we'll move on to policy CBI. You want?
Move to accept the first reading of policy CBI.
Second.
Second.
Move to waive the first reading of policy CBI.
Second.
Second. Okay, so let's vote on that first. Erin?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. And now we'll open it up for discussion. Tom?
So a couple of, one kind of pedantic thing and then a couple of wording things on this one. First, the philosophy thing at the top as a section is not in the MASA policy, and I would suggest we remove that. It's number one. Number two, I like the wording of the MSC version of bullet number 3 a little bit better. Our current one says provide administrative leadership of excellence for the school district, and MASC says provide excellence in administrative leadership of the school district. I think it just rings a little better to me. I don't know about anybody else, but that would also align to the MSC policy. The paragraph after bullet 4, as well would be cleaned up a little bit. The first two sentences, if we align to MASC, again, in this case, it says the school committee and superintendent will periodically develop a set of performance objectives based on the needs of the school district and in keeping with state regulations for evaluation of the superintendent. The superintendent's performance will be reviewed in accordance with specified goals and standards. So it takes out the word annual in the second paragraph because we don't even know that we've agreed to annual necessarily. And the first paragraph, the order is, the first sentence in that paragraph, the order is changed a little bit. And then my last suggestion, and I can put these amendments if we want to do it that way, is the members appointed or elected to the school committee who are not members during the superintendent goal setting process for that performance year may typically choose to forego completing an individual written evaluation. We had a great debate on this one before. We never approved it. I would strike that altogether. It's not in the MASC policy, even if it is sometimes part of the training. It's not a policy necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. Aaron?
My point was about that last paragraph as well. So I agree with just taking it out.
I want to make sure I understand. So basically, because this one we did not review it like we did the other ones, because this is one that was originally put in front of the school committee months ago. So I didn't look at this. So basically you're asking to follow the MASC policy.
Pretty much everything I suggested is to change it to the MASC policy, John.
I just want to make sure I understand it so that I can
So it strikes the word annual because we obviously haven't agreed on annual necessarily because it could be every 2 years based upon the new stuff. It strikes the thing that we added with regards to, or somebody added with regards to not reviewing in an election year. And then just otherwise cleans up the language to match the policy.
Got it. Thank you.
The standard policy.
That was all, Aaron? I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? I would say that we remove that last paragraph as well.
The second to last.
The second to last, you mean, right?
Yeah, second to last, yeah.
Chuck, if I may,
yes.
One suggestion you may just want to do is just say to revert to the current MASC policy. And then the next reading, I can put that back into the MASC policy into the packet.
If you want me to make that clear, John, as an amendment, I'm happy to do that.
It will avoid all this red line confusion in the next one.
So I move that we revert CBI to the current MASC policy in their standard reference guide manual.
Second.
Any discussion? Aaron?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay, so
now we have to accept the first reading.
We got to accept the first reading now. Yeah. Sarah?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay, now we're on to policy BDE.
Move to accept the first reading of policy BDE.
Second.
Aaron?
Wait, don't. We're not voting yet, right, Chuck?
Oh, right. We got a
yep.
Discussion.
Move to waive the first reading of policy BDE.
Second.
Aaron.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. I'm still reeling from the laughing.
You and me both.
Okay, Tom.
So this one, first of all, I didn't find any gaps between this and MASC, but this is where I think I would want us to have more flexibility that MASC is providing. In particular, that very first sentence, where it says shall appoint members to subcommittees at their annual organizational meeting for a period of 1 year. I think we should give ourselves the flexibility to create a subcommittee at any point in time and for whatever duration is necessary. Within reason, of course. We don't want one for 10 years, right? But I don't have the right wording necessarily, but maybe the school committee shall appoint members to the subcommittees to subcommittees as necessary and with a predetermined length of time or something like that. I'm happy to have that wordsmith, but that would be my proposal.
How about the school committee shall establish subcommittees as necessary and period. That's it.
That's perfectly fine from my perspective. Yep.
Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, I mean, I certainly agree with giving ourselves more flexibility in terms of when we create them. I personally think it's probably good discipline to sort of think about, 1 year and a subcommittee sunsets unless we renew it. Otherwise you risk running into a situation where you have inactive subcommittees that are, lingering forever. So that would be my suggestion is that we sort of default to a 1 year period and the committee can always renew a subcommittee's charter, if you will. And we don't have to stick to a year. It's just one possibility, but I do think some sort of time limited duration as a starting point when you establish a committee is probably a good idea. A subcommittee.
Okay, Carla?
I had taken out that line as well, but because we didn't have an established time frame, I added back in 6. A subcommittee will be dissolved by the school committee upon completion of the assignment. So that's how it's just 2 different ways to do what Sean just mentioned.
So there's 2 ways. There's different types of subcommittees that could be established. So if you look at other communities, a lot of them will have, a budget subcommittee, personnel subcommittee, and those are kind of like standing they're every year the chair or whoever appoints people to those. Or you could just establish a subcommittee at a point in time when you need it for a specific purpose. So I think we should, if we're going to set a time frame, maybe I'll call them the standing subcommittees are the ones that have a time frame, but maybe a one that's established for a specific purpose doesn't necessarily have a time frame. It's whenever, I think it's what you just said, whenever the work of that committee is completed. I don't want to make it too. Yes, Tom?
So I totally see Sean's point and agree with it, and I like Carla's way of addressing it. Because I think, adding 6 back, a subcommittee will be dissolved by the school committee upon completion of its assignment, or may be dissolved by the vote of the school committee at any time, gives us the ability to terminate it, or it just automatically, completes its assignment and it's terminated. And I think that gives us the flexibility of, is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? I mean, thinking forward right now, whether or not we're going to have to reappoint people to it, but there's going to be a committee theoretically coming up for Killam, right? That could be a 3 or 4 year committee, right? We don't necessarily want, hopefully we have some continuity to that period of time, but I think if we I like Chuck, your addition of the school committee shall establish subcommittees as necessary, and then Carla's re-addition of number 6. And I would agree with those two things.
John, I have a question. So with the policies we're looking at, whited out 6, was that the MASC?
Yeah, that's MASC.
I wonder why
I don't
they
know why
did
did that.
That would be interesting to know, because, is there a legal reason why they did that?
No, I that's what I was just checking. I didn't see anything in the Mass General laws that would prevent you from doing that.
Sean?
So I'm good with that suggestion of bringing 6 back in. I just want to poke on one thing that you were saying there, Tom. You use the word automatically, like at the completion of the assignment. I would read 6 to still mean it requires affirmative action by the committee to dissolve the subcommittee. We just take the completion of the assignment as the marker that it's time to do that, essentially.
Yeah, there's a will be action there, right? Will be dissolved. You're right.
Okay, just making sure we're on the same page.
No, thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll vote to accept the first reading. Aaron?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay, I think that's you survived, Sarah.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, Sarah.
I've got to say, I'm surprised we're done by now.
I thought we'd be here till 11.
Unless you want to recite the alphabet again, Tom.
Relax, it might be fun.
That was brutal. I did not expect that when we talked about how we were going to handle this.
I'm sure Facebook will take good care of us tonight.
Oh, I'm sure.
Tom, we do have some Q&A. I don't know if you saw this.
I was not looking over, so thank you, Sean. Do you want to, if they're appropriate, you want to take them?
Yeah, they're all related to these policies generally. So these are all from Jeffrey Core on Ridge Road. I emailed in several questions on the policies. How will those comments be addressed? I think a number of them have or were. Aaron's question about multiple members overruling the chair was in my list. Also, Tom's point about missing policy BID was in my list. The next comment is all school committee discussion, quotes, all school committee discussion and deliberation related to the superintendent performance evaluation shall be conducted in open session in accordance with the open meeting law. Should school be capitalized? Also, open meeting law is capitalized in other policies. And the last one, I think the school committee should reauthorize subcommittees at the annual organizational meeting. Multi-year durations should not be allowed.
Okay.
So that the one before the last one, minor capitalization, I think that's probably good. Thanks, Sean, for catching that.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Should we let Sarah do a motion here?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sarah,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Good night, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.